I sat behind a glass pillar at my sister's wedding. From that spot, I couldn't see the stage clearly, only hear the laughter and the clinking of glasses, and my mother's proud voice boasting about her most perfect daughter. No one asked why I was there. No one called me to the front. When the orchestra began to play a love song, a stranger approached, pulled out a chair, and sat beside me. He leaned in, his voice low but firm. "Just follow my lead, and pretend you're my girlfriend." Before I could even react, he stood up. Every pair of eyes in the hall turned toward us. My sister's smile, the perfect bride's smile, froze under the lights. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the day I received that wedding invitation, and from the moment I realized, in this family, someone always has to sit behind the pillar. Before I go on, I want to ask you, where are you watching from today? Drop your city below. 3 months before that wedding, Portland was still chilly. That morning, I was at Flour and Fern, the small bakery where flour, butter, and vanilla blended into something like comfort. I had just placed a batch of honey cinnamon rolls onto a tray when the mail carrier stopped by, leaving a cream-colored envelope, the handwriting soft and slanted. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. Veronica's wedding invitation. I took off my apron and sat down by the window. The bride's name embossed in silver shimmered under the light: Veronica Archer and Nathaniel Hale. Below it, in smaller print, the Ashbury Terrace. Lake Tahoe. A place so luxurious that I had to Google it, and learned that renting it for a single day cost half a year of my apartment rent. I smiled faintly. Mother was probably bragging everywhere about the fairy tale wedding of her eldest daughter, and I, the youngest, the single. The busy baker was still just a footnote at the end of their story. She always knew how to turn perfection into a weapon, and I was always the one standing outside the frame. I turned the card over. There was a smaller note, written in pale blue ink. "Naomi, I know we haven't talked much lately, but it wouldn't be complete without you, V." The words "wouldn't be complete" were bolded. Pretending to sound sincere, I stared at it for a long time, then tucked the envelope into a drawer beneath my order book. That evening, Mother texted Veronica, "We'll have 6 bridesmaids. You'll sit with the relatives in the back. Oh, and remember, don't wear anything too bright." A polite way of saying, don't draw attention to yourself. When the shop lights went out, I made a cup of cocoa, listening to the laughter of the couple upstairs. The scent of cookies still lingered on my hands as I wondered, if love had a hierarchy, where would I stand in that house I had grown used to proving I existed, but they never gave me a real chance. On the wedding day, the Ashbury Terrace gleamed like a crystal dream. White curtains floated in the breeze. Roses were arranged into arches, so elaborate they looked fake. Veronica glowed in her sparkling gown, and my mother stood beside her. Her face lit up as if the stage lights belonged to her. I walked down each aisle, searching for my name card. Front rows, relatives. Close friends. Bridesmaids. Second. Third rows, and then the very last. My name was there, right behind a glass pillar, draped in white flowers. A perfect spot to see the whole view. The usher smiled, but I knew it was a seat meant for someone who shouldn't be in the frame. I sat down. Music played soft yet distant. My mother beamed as the cameras swept across her. No one looked around. No one noticed that I was there too with them. But not among them. I thought I was used to being invisible until he sat down beside me. The orchestra shifted into a love song. A stranger walked toward me. He pulled out the chair next to mine. His voice low and steady. "Just follow my lead, and pretend you're my girlfriend." Before I could react, he stood up. Every eye in the hall turned toward us. Whispers rippled like a camera suddenly changing direction without warning. Veronica's smile, the perfect bride, froze under the lights. I didn't know who he was. All I knew was that, for the first time in my life, everyone was finally looking at me. The message from my mother came on a Tuesday afternoon. While I was weighing butter in the bakery kitchen, Come home for dinner this Sunday. Family reunion. Those last 4 words made my hand slip, and the butter fell onto the counter, leaving a smooth streak like the slide of an old memory. He stood still, listening to the oven crackle, the scent of vanilla mixing with the warm metallic smell of the baking tray. I knew if I didn't come, I'd spend the next month hearing Mother tell everyone about the ungrateful daughter. So I folded my apron, bought a bus ticket, and reminded myself, you're going home for dinner, not to beg for affection. That day, Bellevue was just turning cold, the grass damp, as if someone had brushed it with water. The old house was the same gray carpet, fake flowers with a cloying scent, and Veronica's graduation photo framed on the mantel like a small altar. Mother opened the door and gave me a light hug, the scent of her perfume laced faintly with white wine. Just in time, she said. Veronica's setting the table. I placed the homemade pumpkin pie box on the counter. I brought dessert. She only murmured, eyes fixed on the living room where Veronica was laughing, hair neatly tied, her voice bright and sharp as a newly honed knife. I thought I was only here for dinner. Turns out, I was about to taste things I'd been swallowing my whole life. The tablecloth was white, and the silverware was aligned like a marching formation. Glazed turkey, deep red cranberry sauce, whipped mashed potatoes. Everything looked straight out of a magazine, including the way Veronica rested her hand on Mother's shoulder as she poured wine. I ordered the pecan pie from Alder and Elm, Veronica said, casually dropping the name of Bellevue's most expensive bakery. They use browned butter. Mother tilted her head approvingly. So refined. My dear. Then she turned to me. And you? Naomi, is your little shop still doing? Okay. That word okay fell like a grain of salt into a cup of coffee. I pulled out a chair. Smiling thinly, I brought pumpkin pie. Lavender and honey recipe. Veronica glanced quickly at the box. Oh. Homemade. Cute. There was no sting in her tone. But I could hear the picture frame on the mantel tremble ever so slightly. Dinner began with a chorus of achievements. Mother asked Veronica about her new project, her boss who really values talent, and her plans to buy a house. I spooned some green beans, listening to the delicate clinking of glasses. When the topic shifted to the wedding of her dreams, Veronica turned to me, as if remembering a prop on stage. Naomi, you'll probably be busy at the bakery that day. Just show up. Don't worry about anything. I swallowed and said softly, I know. Praise always found the right place. I was simply sitting in the wrong one. As the fork scraped across porcelain, old memories cracked open. When I was a child, I folded paper cranes, Mother said. Pretty. But Veronica draws people more skillfully. At 16, I won first prize in a baking contest. Mother smiled for a minute, then switched to talking about Veronica being chosen to lead the debate team. For my 18th birthday, the bracelet Mother gave me was engraved with, "Be more practical." For Veronica's 20th, she rented an entire restaurant with live music. The cuts were small, but memory has good aim. It remembers every accidental comparison. Every time I was asked to step aside for a more important conversation, I learned to leave parties early to clean the kitchen and to love the feel of flour because it never judged anyone, and to find peace in the steady rhythm of whisking cream. In the kitchen, I was the maker. In the living room, I was the shadow. That Thanksgiving night, I took a bite of turkey just as Mother asked Veronica about her ridiculously expensive but worth it wedding dress. The words were light, but my throat felt drier than the desert. On the doorway, condensation glittered like an audience of silent witnesses. No knife cuts as deeply as lopsided praise. It doesn't draw blood. It just makes you never want to look in the mirror again. I stood to help clean up, carrying a plate still streaked with gravy. The floor was smooth. I slipped slightly. The plate fell and split in two. The crisp sound landed like applause at the wrong moment. Silence fell. Mother exhaled. Soft but sharp. You're always rushing. Naomi, Veronica laughed, a beautiful sound, like a perfume commercial. Aunt Ruth, who rarely spoke, set her napkin down and looked up. Vivian. She's helping her sister. Mother's lips tightened. She picked up the largest shard, her voice low but far-reaching. I'm not blaming her. I just wish she'd be more careful. You can build walls out of sentences like that, each brick made of a single word more. I knelt, gathering the shards in my palms. They were cold. From the oven, the scent of cinnamon and honey drifted out. My pumpkin pie was ready, its golden surface rising softly like a late apology. I let it rest, placed it on a wooden board, and cut a small slice to offer. Mother glanced over. Just leave it over there. Dear, the bakery pie's enough for everyone, Veronica added gently. You can take it home, it'll still taste good tomorrow. I set down the knife, hearing the lavender scent fade like a candle snuffed out by a single breath. When people say take it home, they mean there's no place for what you made here, or for the heart you put into it. After dinner, I washed the dishes alone. Warm water brushed against my flour-cracked fingers. Outside, the garden lights flickered softly in the wind. In the living room, Mother and Veronica discussed bridal fittings, their laughter thin as crystal glass. I dried my hands, opened the fridge, and took out my pumpkin pie untouched. Not a single slice missing, not a single uneven edge. I wrapped it carefully in parchment, slipped it into a cloth bag, and held it close like something unnamed but precious. Before leaving, I paused at the doorway. Mother turned just in time, smiling politely. Drive safe. Dear, don't forget to confirm the wedding date, Veronica added. And don't wear white. Okay, I smiled. I know. The air smelled of wet rain and pine. On the sidewalk, the first snow fell thin as dust, just enough to leave footprints of someone who had just remembered that silence. 2. Can be a punishment. I hugged the pie bag to my chest and walked faster, hearing in my mind, for the first time, a sentence as clear as a clock's tick. Next time, I won't bring pie. I'll bring myself bright enough, steady enough that they'll have to see me. The music stopped for a beat, as if even the orchestra was caught off guard. I stayed seated behind the glass pillar, and my hands on my lap, my heart pounding like a drum out of sync. Every gaze turned toward me, and the man who had just stood up, Marcus. As I would learn later, he said something to the host, then looked at me with a calmness that felt deliberate, as if everything had been planned. Light reflected off his lapel, the silver of his buttons blending with the gold glow of the chandeliers. And somehow, I felt strangely safe. As the murmurs spread through the crowd, I realized for the first time in my life, I was the center of attention, and not because I'd done something wrong. I lowered my head, hiding a faint smile behind my champagne glass. I didn't know who he was, but in a hall full of people, he made me feel less alone. When the ceremony ended, soft jazz began to play. The lights dimmed just enough to make everything feel more intimate, and just enough for me to disappear again. I chose a table at the far edge near the buffet, where no one would notice. A moment later, Marcus appeared, holding 2 glasses of wine. Mind if I join you, unless someone objects? He said, his tone even, but his eyes curved with a hint of humor. I accepted the glass, catching the scent of oak mingled with a trace of mint. Thank you. But you don't have to save me. Save you, he chuckled. I just saw someone who didn't belong here. Like me. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the laughter from the main table rippling like distant waves. Marcus pointed to the glass pillar behind me. Sitting here has its perks, fewer collisions. I sipped my wine and said softly, and easier to be forgotten. He turned, his gaze resting on me a moment longer than usual. Only if you accept that, he didn't say more. But I understood some people walk into your life only to show you how long you've been bowing your head. I looked toward the center of the hall, Mother was laughing, leaning on Veronica's shoulder as guests came to congratulate them. Every spotlight shone on them, two women alike in confidence, different only in what I had never been given recognition. Marcus stayed quiet beside me, occasionally nodding at people passing by. The ceiling lights reflected off our glasses, turning the table into a mirror. In that reflection, I saw myself small, but unmistakably there. "Do you often watch them from afar like this?" Marcus asked. "I'm used to it. From a distance, everything looks more perfect." He smiled faintly. "Or more fake." I looked up at him, and for the first time that evening, I laughed. Truly laughed. The music changed key slower. "Warmer," Marcus said. "Let's get some air. It's getting stuffy in here." He hesitated, then nodded. "It turns out, all it takes is one honest look to realize how long you've been forgotten." Outside, the air was cool and soft. The lake reflected the golden lights like a mirror breathing smoke. Laughter and music floated across the water. Marcus loosened his tie, exhaling a faint cloud of white mist. "My family used to look down on me," he said. "My father thought working in environmental consulting was frivolous. He wanted me to take over his bank. I left home at 22. With nothing. I listened. The wind carried the scent of pine, tangled with lavender from my hair." "Do you regret it?" I asked. "No. I only regret being silent for too long. Sometimes silence makes people believe they're right." I looked down at the lake, seeing my reflection beside his. The wind rippled the water. My image wavered, then returned. "Maybe I've been silent too long," I whispered. Marcus tilted his head, his voice low. "Silence can be a form of defiance if you know when to break it." In the cold breath of the lake, I realized rebellion doesn't always need noise. When we returned to the hall, fireworks began bursting above the water. The light reflected off the glass pillar, the one I'd sat behind all evening. Now, under that same light, I was no longer hiding behind anyone. Marcus raised his glass lightly toward mine. "They'll have to see you." I didn't answer. I just watched the fireworks shimmer through the wine. Bright, warm, and real. Inside, Veronica and Nathaniel danced their first dance. Mother stood nearby, pride gleaming in her eyes. I watched them, but the sting was gone. What remained was quiet, and within that quiet, resolve. As the final firework lit up the sky, I smiled. Not the smile of someone who had won, but of someone who finally understood that silence can echo if you choose the right moment. He said, "They'll have to see you." I didn't answer. I just watched the reflection of fireworks in my glass and knew that this time, I wouldn't bow my head. The small card, italicized and neatly placed on the white linen table. Read row 12. Seat K, right beneath the words. A faint fingerprint remained a reminder that I had once sat behind the pillar, and perhaps always would have. If not for him. Marcus picked up the card and smiled slightly. "This doesn't suit you." He took both place cards and slipped them into the inner pocket of his jacket. A clean, decisive gesture, as if he was used to changing his place in the world without asking permission. "Just follow my lead." His hand rested lightly on my back, not pushing, just guiding. We walked past rows of chairs, through the scent of lilies and oak-aged wine, until we reached the table marked North Lake Health Systems, the VIP table directly under the stage lights. Marcus pulled out a chair and gestured to the empty seat beside him. "Sit." I took a deep breath, felt the taste of wine on my tongue, and sat down. A single chair can change the place of a lifetime if you dare to sit in it. Marcus escaped from the logistics side. "Did you?" A bearded man laughed, his voice rough with wine. "Needed a change of scenery," Marcus said, tilting his head toward me. "This is Naomi." The sharp-eyed woman with short hair Patricia Rowan glanced over. "Marcus's girlfriend tonight. We came together." he replied. Simple and seamless. The waiter set down plates of crab cake, glazed with orange reduction. I cut a small piece. The scent of orange peel rose softly. It could use a little lemon. I murmured. The acidity brightens the crab. Patricia paused mid-bite, then laughed. A spotlight for flavor. I like the way you think. Marcus raised his glass. She sees the light in what others only taste. For the first time that evening, I didn't hear my voice bounce off a glass pillar. It met the air, and stayed there. Being underestimated is easy until you speak at the right moment. My mother's perfume arrived before she did. Vivian Archer placed a hand on the back of my chair. Her smile perfectly practiced. Veronica, in her silver wedding gown, stood beside her. This table is for Nathaniel's colleagues. Mother set her tone soft as silk, but straight as a steel ruler. Marcus looked up, his voice calm. We were just trying to make the dinner conversation more interesting. Patricia turned cheerfully toward my mother. Thanks to that, I heard the best line of the night. The spotlight brilliant. Veronica smiled, her gaze landing on my dress. Nice color on you, though the fabric's a bit thin, but it'll look great on camera. I answered lightly, sharp as a knife. Not every dish needs layers. Her smile faltered for half a beat. Mother nodded with flawless grace. I'll go greet a few people at the other table. When they left, the music rose half a tone. I touched the chair's wooden edge warm, solid. My back sat a little straighter than before. Politeness has its edges, it just hides them behind laughter. The host invited everyone to raise their glasses. Nathaniel gave his speech smooth, rehearsed, forgettable. When the glasses lowered, Marcus stood. I want to thank North Lake Health Systems for their strong commitment to clean energy. The words made a few heads turn. Lead consultant. That title dropped like a small stone and rippled wide. I saw Mother's eyes waver, while Veronica smiled too brightly. Tucking her hair, her usual gesture when she was uncomfortable, Marcus raised his glass. Not every decision shines, but some choices leave a light that lasts longer than diamonds. The chandelier scattered across the crystal glasses, through the rim of my glass. The night fractured into 1,000 points of light, as if the distance between me and them was finally cracking open. Marcus leaned closer. Are you okay? I whispered. I can hear my own heartbeat. So this is how it feels when a stranger sits in the seat that the familiar ones never imagined for you. As the music shifted into a slower rhythm, Patricia leaned in. Would you like to see the live dessert station? The chefs torching creme brulee? I'd love another opinion, from someone with a spotlight. At the far end of the hall, Mother lifted her hand in a subtle signal. I looked at Marcus. He nodded once. Go. I'll be right here. The auxiliary kitchen glowed bright. The torch flame painted an amber ribbon across the custard surface. The scent of burnt vanilla mixed with the crisp sound of caramel cracking. I tapped the shell gently with my spoon. A thin fracture appeared delicate as a strand of hair. Reduce the sweetness by 2%. I said, and add a touch of finely grated lemon zest. When the spoon breaks the surface, the oils bloom first, then the richness follows. Patricia paused for a beat, then nodded. Next month, North Lake has a major event. I want you to lead the dessert course. I looked up. The light reflected off the steel counter straight, bright, with no pillar casting shadows in between. At the banquet table, confetti burst and rained like paper rain. Will you do it? Patricia asked. I set the spoon down, my palms still warm. Tonight, I tried sitting in a different seat. Maybe it was time to put my name on it. Mother's message arrived at 10 in the morning, short and polite. So polite that I could almost hear the wind pass through each word. Come home for dinner tonight. Just family. I want to thank you for helping at the wedding. That ellipsis sat in the middle of the sentence like a paperclip, holding down the lid of a memory box, careful not to let it spring open too far. I set my phone down on the counter, measured sugar, and sifted flower movements so familiar, they slowed my heartbeat. Marcus appeared at the kitchen door. Sleeves rolled up. Morning rain still clinging to his hair. "You're going back tonight. They want to check my temperature. Then go back with your own flame." The road to my mother's house ran through early turning maples, their red leaves like paper edges singed by fire. The door opened, the scent of vanilla candles and polished wood rushed out, clean to the point of sterile. The long dining table was covered in linen. The wine glasses lined up like an army. Veronica sat diagonally at the head of the table, her wedding ring catching light against the rim of her glass. Nathaniel smiled thinly. Mother stepped out from the kitchen, hugged me perfunctorily, the jasmine scent of her perfume colder than I remembered from childhood. "You're here." "Good." The word good landed like a knife, pressing lightly into a cutting board, not deep, but sharp enough to hear. Some invitations aren't made to welcome you. They're to test if you'll dare cross the threshold. The pumpkin soup steamed, its surface smooth as a mirror's skin, specks of black pepper scattered like musical notes beautiful enough to fear disturbing. Cutlery chimed softly, each sound perfectly round, like a rehearsed civility. Mother recounted the wedding, how the flowers arrived late, but thankfully still in time. Veronica chimed in, placing her hand on Nathaniel's, smiling. "Thank goodness for the VIP table that saved the day. Prettier spot than I expected," I said honestly, like tasting the first spoonful of soup. Mother set her spoon down without looking at me. "Naomi, you're still working at that little bakery." The word little flicked the rim of her glass. "I still make things that help people smile after a long day." Veronica dabbed her lips with a napkin. Her smile tilted. "Sweet." The word dropped onto the table like a hard candy, sweet and useless. Marcus swirled his wine. The red reflection circled the glass. He said nothing, but the subtle nod he gave set my place back where it belonged, level with every other fork on the table. The most elegant kind of contempt is the one wrapped in kindness. The pan-seared salmon arrived. The skin crackled just as my knife touched it, releasing the scent of lemon butter, perfectly timed with Veronica's question. "I heard Northlake's planning some event." "You're," she paused half a beat, "heading the dessert section." "Right," Patricia suggested it. I said, laying my knife down. Tone polite, gaze steady. Veronica laughed high. "Delicate Adorable," by Naomi, in the bottom corner of the menu. Font size 6. A few light giggles bubbled around the table like sparkling wine. Mother didn't laugh, but she didn't stop them either. She straightened her silverware as if restoring the proper order of things. I poured more wine, letting a few seconds of silence rise like bread in an oven. "If they like it small, that's fine," I said. "It just means they'll have to lean closer to read." Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Actually, Northlake values real talent. Patricia's very particular. Particular is a buyer's virtue." Mother said, her tone clipped like paper between fingers. "I'm glad you have a place to express yourself. Even if it's just dessert." The words "just dessert" struck the bone of my ear. Outside, rain had begun. The first drops tapped softly on the window, like fingers counting beats for silence. I smiled and lifted my fork. If they wanted a performance, I wasn't the actress. I was the cook passing through the stage. When you don't react, they start fearing your silence more than your voice. Marcus set his glass down. The sound rang clean and sharp. "Interesting," he said casually. "Since at that event, I'll be presenting with Naomi." The air froze for half a beat. Veronica tilted her head. "You're joking, no? Northlake wants to connect sustainability with flavor." He turned to me, eyes glinting with mischief. "The spotlight for taste." I remember I heard Nathaniel's chair scrape slightly. Mother lifted her glass, the motion smooth. But I saw her fingers tighten around the stem. "Ah, so that's why you invited Marcus to sit at the VIP table." Marcus smiled slowly. "No, that's why they invited Naomi closer to the stage. A hairline crack ran through the air. Veronica lowered her eyes and half smiled. Congratulations. Truly. I raised my glass, clinking gently against Mother's Hauersellen. The sound was as thin as a thread, but enough to stitch the balance back into the room. I hadn't defeated anyone. I'd simply pulled my chair back to where it belonged. Sometimes, it takes just one sentence to shift the weight of an entire room. The dishes were cleared. Faint red wine stains lingered on the tablecloth like traces of old lipstick. Mother stood in the kitchen doorway, the halogen light cutting sharply across her nose bridge. You've changed a lot. Naomi. No. I just stopped asking permission to exist. Her lips pressed tight. She turned away. The sound of her heels clicked evenly across the wooden floor. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Marcus opened the umbrella. The smell of wet earth and young maple leaves rushed in. As I reached for the car door handle, he held out a firm white envelope. Embossed in silver letters, formal invitation. North Lake Annual Sustainability Gala. I ran my fingers along the spine of the paper. The faint texture beneath my touch felt like the surface of caramel right after it cracks. You okay? He asked. It's just another dinner, I said, folding the invitation. But maybe the last one. I'll sit at their table the same way. Inside the house, laughter broke out late. Misplaced. Like a background score that missed the scene. I shut the car door. Rain pattered against the windshield, steady as a mixer beating cream. I looked at the invitation again. They've seen me at their table. I whispered. Now, let them see me on the stage. The North Lake Gala opened like a scene built entirely out of light. The glass ceiling reflected hundreds of round lamps, each one a tiny sun. The scent of freshly polished oak mingled with the aroma of melting chocolate from my dessert station, giving the air a sweetness and a quiet thrill. I adjusted the nameplate in front of the display, Sustainability X Flavor Narrative curated by Naomi Archer. The letters were italic. Simple, but clear. No one could say I was just a baker anymore. Marcus approached, wearing a dark charcoal suit. Tilosend. He smiled, placing a microphone on the table for a sound check. Check 1, 2. The echo bounced perfectly through the hall. I stood beside him, still arranging the panna cotta plates. Do you always have to test everything 3 times? Because the one time that matters, Naomi, he said softly, is the time everyone sees you. Tonight, no one could pull me behind a pillar, because the lights themselves were searching for me. Guests began to pour in, heels clicking against marble like a choreographed symphony. The first wine glasses clinked, crisp and bright. Patricia Rowan, the event director, approached, pearls around her wrist, her smile carrying authority. Naomi, your installation is stunning. We'll highlight it in the opening remarks. I thanked her, steadying my breath as I saw Vivian and Veronica walk in. They paused at the doorway, light catching their faces, half surprised, half uneasy. Veronica whispered something to her husband, her smile slightly stiff. Mother stayed composed, only glancing briefly at the North Lake logo beside my name. Impressive space, she murmured. Veronica smiled thinly. Charming, in a boutique kind of way. I nodded. Boutique still has its own clients, doesn't it? Marcus appeared right on cue, smiling lightly at them. Naomi's the reason North Lake chose this year's theme. Without her, the gala would have no flavor. The air stilled for a second, then the music swelled again. I simply smiled and laid a white napkin on the counter as if I hadn't heard a thing. Some people touched the walls of power, but tonight, the walls were the ones moving back. When the stage lights softened into a golden beam, Patricia stepped to the podium. Her voice carried through the speakers. Welcome to the North Lake Annual Sustainability Gala. This year, we speak of renewal not only in the environment, but also in how people create value. Then she invited Marcus and me to the stage. Applause thundered like wind striking glass. Marcus spoke first, his voice steady and grounded. Sustainability isn't just about reducing waste. It's about finding ways for every product to tell a story about the earth and about the people who care for it. He gestured for me to step forward. The spotlight fell on my pale olive dress. The fabric shimmered like water's surface. I took a deep breath. I'm not a scientist. I began. I'm just a baker. But if you taste closely, you'll find that every layer of flavor carries the story of the soil it came from. On the screen behind us, images appeared: local lavender fields, bees gathering nectar, and hands harvesting regeneratively grown cacao. I believe that when we respect the earth, flavor learns to respect us. The moment the words left my lips, the room went silent, then erupted in applause. Cameras flashed in bursts. Patricia turned toward me, voice clear and proud. And tonight, I'm honored to announce Northlake is officially partnering long-term with Naomi Archer for our sustainable event series. A symbol of creativity and responsibility. The lights shifted. From the third row, I saw my mother and Veronica. They were clapping, but the look in their eyes wasn't pity or superiority anymore. It was something else: recognition. Applause is the only language that doesn't need translation, especially when someone can't find the words to say, "I'm sorry." After the main presentation, I walked down the glass corridor leading backstage. Light bounced off the metallic walls, doubling my reflection: two versions of the same person, the old one and the one finally being seen. Vivian caught up to me. "Naomi," she said. "I didn't realize you'd come this far." "I didn't either." "Mom." He just kept going. Veronica stepped closer, her voice soft but cool. "I just wanted to say, you really know how to pick your stage." I looked at her straight on. Maybe because I spent too long standing behind a pillar. Marcus appeared, holding a folder. "Naomi, the reporter from Portland Life is waiting. They want to talk about your local honey." I nodded, smiling at the two women in front of me. "Excuse me, I have an interview." As I walked past them, I could feel both of their gazes on my back, heavy, but no longer making me bow. It wasn't avoidance. It was steering the conversation to where my voice could be heard. The gala shifted into the dinner hour. Lights softened. Candles glowed along the buffet. Small plates lined up neatly. Chocolate raspberry tart, Naomi Archer concept. I offered a sample to the journalist. The sound of the fork breaking the first layer of chocolate was like a quiet applause. They tasted and nodded. "Perfect." Across the hall, I saw Mother standing beside Veronica. Both watched silently as the giant backdrop displayed my name illuminated by the flash of cameras. Mother smiled faintly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the letters. Marcus leaned close and whispered, "Told you light was made to find you." I smiled, seeing the reflection of the lights in my glass, in his eyes, and in my own. My phone buzzed. A message from Veronica. "Can we meet for lunch tomorrow?" I stared at the screen for a while, feeling an unexpected calm. Maybe people don't always change because they want to. Sometimes they change because they can't keep pretending anymore. I folded my phone shut. This time, I wouldn't bring dessert to their table. I'd let them come find me. That morning, Portland was so bright I had to squint. I arrived at the Birch Room right on time, my gray-blue linen dress blending into the cafe's white brick walls. Inside, the light was soft, the air a mix of roasted coffee and fresh orange zest. Veronica was already seated at the window table. Her coffee sat untouched. The milk foam had begun to shrink, drawing a small circle in the center. "Thanks for coming," she said, her tone polite, like this was a meeting between two strangers. I smiled. "You wanted to talk about the gala. I just wanted to clear a few things up. That night caused some misunderstandings." I nodded and stirred my tea. The light bounced off the silver spoon, scattering across the wall. Light doesn't choose sides. It simply reflects where something dares to shine. Some conversations aren't for reconciliation, but for ending a myth. Veronica sipped her coffee, avoiding my gaze. "You know, Mom always wanted to protect the family image. I just did what she asked. I never meant to hurt you. I stayed silent. She continued. A bit too quickly, actually. I'm happy for your success. It's just, sometimes people get the wrong idea. After the gala, everyone asked about you. Even Bennett reached out. They thought I had asked you to help with the dessert concept. She laughed lightly. But the sound never reached her eyes. I looked straight at her. What are you more afraid of? Veronica. That people remember me or that they stop asking about you? She froze for a moment. Then whispered, You don't understand. I've always had to keep things under control. If I don't shape the story, someone else will. And you've done that to me before. I set my cup down. The soft clink sounded like the final period at the end of a story. I'm not a supporting prop in your narrative. When the one who once looked down on you feels the need to explain, you've already won. The bell above the door rang. Vivian entered, dressed in a pale cream dress and thin leather gloves. Her face unreadable. The whole cafe paused for a second. People always do when someone walks in carrying an aura of power. I didn't mean to intrude, she said calmly. I just wanted to speak while things are still quiet. Veronica looked up, frowning. Mom, I thought. Sit down. I said nothing. Vivian took the seat across from me, placing her purse carefully on the chair. I know the gala made things uncomfortable, she began. But I just want you two to get along. Family is the most important thing. I looked up. Slowly. Important enough that someone has to disappear so another can shine. Vivian's hand tightened around her glass. Don't say that. Naomi. I'm only saying what we both know. The air in the cafe thickened. Veronica glanced around. Worried people might overhear. Mom. Please. Not here, I cut in. If you need someone to represent the family, I'm not the one. I represent myself. Some conversations end a bloodline, but begin a generation. From the next table, whispers rippled. Isn't that Miss Archer, the one from the North Lake Gala last night? Yes. That's her. The woman who tells stories through flavor. Veronica's face paled. She looked down at her coffee. Vivian brushed her hair back, still clinging to composure. I turned toward the voices and smiled. Good morning. Yes, we're just talking about keeping flavors honest. In pastries. And in life. No one said another word. But that silence felt like applause without sound. Veronica bit her lip, murmuring, You really have changed. I replied softly. No. I just stopped asking permission to be myself. A shaft of sunlight spilled through the window, landing squarely on my table. It didn't ask permission to shine. Sometimes, justice is simply the moment someone has to see you in the real light. Marcus walked in, the backlight shifting the cafe's tone. He nodded politely to Vivian and Veronica. His voice even. Naomi. We're late for the North Lake meeting. I stood. Thank you for the morning, I said. Vivian leaned forward, her voice quiet but still clinging to pride. Naomi. I just hope, when people ask, you'll still say we're a family. I turned, sunlight grazing my shoulder. I'll say we once were. I left the cafe, the scent of coffee and orange following me to the door. Behind me, a chair scraped softly. Someone exhaled. And in that moment, I knew silence no longer meant weakness. When the door closed, Naomi no longer heard them call her name, only the wind chime outside, ringing clear and free. That morning, Portland smelled of waffles and lavender. Sunlight slanted through the wide glass window, glinting against the pale oak countertop. I placed the tray of raspberry tarts on the shelf, straightening each edge of parchment. They didn't need to look luxurious, just gentle enough for someone to walk in and feel at peace. Little Harper, 8 years old, was shaping dough nearly twice the size of her hands. I guided her on how to roll the crust evenly, then let her do the rest. As her small fingertips pressed the edges of the pastry, I heard something quiet break inside me, like the last trace of morning mist dissolving in sunlight. After years of trying to scream just to be heard, I finally chose to speak through scent. Marcus stepped into the shop with a bundle of dried lavender in his hands. He set it beside the register and nodded. This time it's not for encouragement, it's for congratulations. He tilted my heel. What's going on? He held up an invitation. Sustainable Creators of the Year nominee Naomi Archer. Archer Atelier. I read each line carefully. No trembling. No shock. It simply felt right. You know what's funny, I said. Since I opened this bakery, no one's ever asked where I studied cooking. They only ask how my pastries make them remember something. Marcus smiled softly. Because you don't make pastries. You make memories. Victory doesn't need fireworks, only the scent someone never forgets. By late afternoon, I received a handwritten envelope, brown craft paper, with the Portland Life magazine logo embossed in the corner. Inside was a short letter, written in violet ink. Dear Naomi, thank you for not choosing the loud path. Your story inspires those who've been overlooked, proof that dignity never needs to shout. We're honored to feature you in next month's special issue. Naomi Archer, the woman who redefined quiet success. Warm regards. Patricia Monroe. I closed the letter without rushing to my computer. Instead, I placed it on the wooden shelf beside the photo of my grandmother, the one who once said, good pastries should remind people that they were once loved. When you no longer need to say I'm fine now, that's when you truly are. The next noon, Veronica walked in. She wore a white blouse and light gray trousers and carried a paper bag. I was wiping the glass counter and paused for just a second. Hi, she said. I just wanted to stop by. I nodded. The raspberry tarts just came out of the oven back counter. She picked one, paid for it, and said nothing more. Before leaving, she left a brown envelope on the counter. After she was gone, I opened it. Inside was an old photo, her and me, around 6 years old, sitting beneath the persimmon tree behind our house. My hair was dusted with flour, my cheeks flushed orange from the sun. She was laughing, not the polished gala smile, but the kind a child gives when she doesn't need to fight for her place. I stared at it for a long while, not to forgive, just to acknowledge she was once a part of me. And now, I no longer need her to be myself. Forgiveness isn't mercy. It's choosing not to carry the pain anymore. The afternoon softened like a low note. I brewed Earl Grey and set the cup on the table by the window. Amber sunlight slanted across the lavender leaves, painting shadows on the white wall. Marcus arrived, watching me. If you could start over, would you do anything differently? He asked. I didn't answer right away. I poured the tea. I think everything happened exactly as it needed to, not to help me get revenge, but to teach me how to stand without needing anyone to hold me up. The doorbell rang. Harper turned around, holding a croissant with burnt edges. Miss Naomi. I messed it up. I smiled. Then you're learning how to begin. I walked over and opened the last window. The wind slipped through the frame, carrying the scent of warm pastry and children's laughter. No one had to stay silent anymore. That light didn't belong to the past or the future. It belonged to those brave enough to stand still and still shine. Morning light in Charleston is always soft as mist. My shop Archer Atelier had been cleaned the night before. The scent of baked pastry mixed with dried lavender in the glass jar made me feel as if I were somewhere in a quiet cafe in France. I flipped the light switch. Warm yellow light washed over the white wooden walls, quietly warming the room. I dusted powdered sugar over a batch of freshly baked tarts, then poured myself a cup of Earl Grey tea. On the counter, my notebook lay open, today's page still blank. I sat down and wrote the first line. Maybe all of us have once been placed behind a pillar. I remembered that wedding chair. I remembered my sister's white satin dress, my mother's laughter echoing among the guests, and her eyes glancing past me as if I were a misplaced decoration. I used to believe that if I were good enough, obedient enough, sacrificial enough, Then I would finally be seen. But the look from that man, the one who asked me to pretend to be his girlfriend, was the first thing that made me realize I didn't need to be accepted to be worthy of existing. Some people will never see you, not because you're not enough, but because they've already decided to look the other way, and you can't turn their mirror for them. You can only learn to light your own reflection. I closed the notebook. Through the window, the neighbor's little girl stood outside the shop, holding 2 coins in her hand, her eyes wide with excitement. I smiled, opened the door, and let the sunlight pour in with the sound of the wind chime. Maybe victory doesn't need fireworks. It only needs you to stop bowing your head when you pass a mirror each morning. And what about you? Have you ever been made to sit behind a pillar? Has anyone ever made you feel invisible? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget, hit like and subscribe so I can tell you more stories that matter. Stories about strength, self-worth, and the quiet power of being seen.